My wife looked at me with that cold stare and said the words that cut deeper than any blade. "You are replaceable. Accept it." For a second, I could not even breathe. The room was quiet. The clock ticked in the background. She smirked, almost proud of the cruelty in her voice. She believed she had the upper hand. She thought I would crumble, argue, maybe beg her to take the words back. Instead, I sat still, my face calm, my body frozen, while inside me a storm was roaring. I remembered every moment that led us here. The late nights at work so I could pay for her classes. The weekends sacrificed to help her chase her dreams. The vacations I skipped because we could not afford both. I carried the weight of responsibility because I believed we were building something together. And in the end, I was nothing more than a piece of furniture in her eyes. Replaceable, disposable. She leaned back in her chair, satisfied with her little performance. The smirk stayed on her lips like she was daring me to argue. My throat burned with the things I wanted to say. How could she throw away years of loyalty, of love, with a single sentence? But I swallowed the anger. I forced myself to nod slowly, like her words did not matter, even though they tore me apart inside. That nod was not weakness. It was the first brick laid in the wall of my revenge. She thought silence meant defeat, but silence can be sharper than any reply. It gives nothing away. It plants fear where arrogance once lived. I looked at her across the table and wondered how she had changed so much. This was the same woman who once held my hand and swore I was her world. The same woman who cried in my arms when life broke her down. I picked her up when she was low. I celebrated her wins like they were my own. I was her rock, her partner, her shield. And now I was just an option, a placeholder, something to be swapped out when she felt bored. My chest ached, but I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I would not argue, would not shout, would not beg. Instead, I replayed her words in my mind, burning them into memory, letting the sting harden into resolve. If she wanted to see just how replaceable I was, then I would show her. Not with anger, not with violence, but with the kind of calm, deliberate action she would never forget. She finished her wine, stood up, and walked out of the room like nothing had happened. She had no idea she had just awakened something in me. Something colder, something stronger. She believed she was untouchable. But I had learned something in that moment, too. When someone shows you that they can discard you so easily, the best revenge is to make yourself impossible to replace. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her words echoing in the silence. "You are replaceable." Fine. Let her believe that. My calm nod was my mask, hiding the storm that was coming. She thought she had power. Soon, she would understand just how quickly power can shift. The unraveling of our marriage was not sudden. It was slow, deliberate, like a thread being pulled from the edge of a sweater until everything begins to collapse. I look back now and realize it had been happening for months, maybe even years, but at the time I was too blinded by love and loyalty to see it clearly. Her dismissive comments had become part of our daily life. Little jabs disguised as jokes. Comparisons that cut into me like hidden blades. Why can't you be more ambitious like so-and-so's husband? Why don't you ever surprise me like my friend's boyfriend? Why do you always seem so tired and dull? Each remark chipped away at my dignity, leaving me smaller, quieter, more invisible in my own home. There were moments when I felt like I was fading into the background. We would be sitting in the same room, but her attention was always elsewhere. Her phone, her friends, her endless talks about people who seemed so much more exciting than me. I would try to start conversations, but she would sigh, roll her eyes, or say she was too busy. I was not a partner anymore. I was an audience she never looked at, a shadow she barely noticed. At family gatherings, the betrayal grew deeper. She played the victim in front of them, weaving stories where I was painted as controlling, boring, even emotionally distant. I watched her twist reality, turning her dismissive behavior into some kind of self-defense. Her family believed her without question. I could see it in the way they looked at me, the way their conversations shifted when I entered the room. I was the outsider, the one who was not good enough, the one who somehow held her back, and she let them believe it. Worse, she encouraged it. In those moments, I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to stand up and shout the truth, to tell them about the late nights I worked so she could chase her dreams, the countless ways I supported her while she chipped away at me. But I did not. I stayed silent, because I realized something important. Words would not save me here. Arguing with her lies would only make me look desperate. Instead, I began to collect proof. Quietly, patiently. Every insult she threw my way, I wrote it down. Every screenshot of her dismissive messages, every conversation where she twisted things against me, I saved. At first, it was painful, almost unbearable, to read her words and see just how little she valued me. But the more I gathered, the stronger I felt. It was no longer just her words against mine. I had evidence. She thought she was clever, playing the perfect victim in front of others while mocking me behind closed doors. But I was watching, I was listening. And for once, I was no longer reacting with anger or hurt, I was documenting. I let her believe I was shrinking, that I was broken. In truth, I was building something stronger than denial. The betrayal was no longer just between us. It had spread into the family, into the people I once thought were my allies. And yet, I stayed quiet, because when the time came, I would not need to defend myself. Her own words, her own actions would destroy her image, and I would be ready. The turning point came slowly, but when it arrived, it was undeniable. My wife no longer tried to hide her disregard for our marriage. She spent more time with friends, always with vague explanations and half-smiles that carried more arrogance than care. Nights grew longer, excuses grew thinner, and every time I asked where she had been, she brushed me off with sarcasm. "Why are you so paranoid? Do you ever stop nagging? It's not a big deal." Those were her answers, never truth, never warmth. She had convinced herself I was too weak, too invested, too dependent to ever walk away. Her arrogance was almost breathtaking. She believed she had complete control. She could push, insult, and dismiss me without fear of consequences. And maybe, once upon a time, that would have been true. I had poured so much of myself into our marriage, my energy, my patience, my loyalty, that I forgot to value myself. But now I began to see things differently. Her contempt was not a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of hers. In quiet moments, I started reflecting on everything I had done for her. The long nights working to support her dreams. The sacrifices I made to build a life she barely acknowledged. I replayed scenes in my head. The trips we took that I carefully planned. The gifts I gave that she accepted without gratitude. The way I had always put her first while she treated me like an afterthought. It hurt, but it also lit a fire in me. I began to understand something she never considered. I was not powerless. Instead of fighting back with arguments, I chose something far more dangerous: patience. I stopped trying to convince her of my worth. Instead, I began quietly planting seeds of truth with the very people she thought would always defend her. At family dinners, I would casually mention the late nights, the missed calls, the cold silences between us. Not in anger, not in desperation, just as facts slipped into conversation. A small sigh here, a casual remark there. And slowly, I watched her perfect image start to crack. Her family, the same people who once believed every word she said, began to notice the inconsistencies. They saw her arrive late, saw her brush me off with the same sarcasm she used on me at home. They began to ask questions, not to me, but to her, and I could see her irritation building each time she had to explain herself. That was the moment I knew. My silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. Every word I didn't say, every argument I didn't engage in, was a weapon I was sharpening. She thought she could humiliate me, reduce me, replace me. But what she never realized was that I was quietly showing the people around us who she really was. Her arrogance blinded her. She believed I would endure it forever. But every late night, every dismissive comment, every moment she treated me as if I were disposable. It was fuel. She had no idea I was already setting the stage for the truth to destroy her carefully built facade. And when it finally collapsed, I wouldn't have to say a word. The moment finally came, though it was dressed in the same cruel casualness as all the others. We were sitting across from each other, and in the middle of a mundane conversation, she smirked and threw another dagger into me. "You should be grateful I even tolerate you," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. No hesitation, no awareness of how deeply it cut. She meant every word, and she believed I would just absorb it like I always had. But this time, something inside me shifted. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I didn't even raise my voice. I simply nodded, just as I had the first time she told me I was replaceable. Except now, my silence wasn't masking pain, it was hiding resolve. That night, while she scrolled through her phone in another room, I quietly began to replace myself. I packed the essentials, my clothes, personal files, keepsakes that actually mattered to me. I moved with calm precision, not rushed, not panicked. Every fold of fabric into my bag felt like a step out of her shadow. I didn't leave a note, and I didn't announce my departure. Instead, I left behind something far heavier than my presence: the truth. Over weeks and months, I had collected messages, insults, screenshots of her arrogance and her double-faced behavior. Every sarcastic jab she texted me, every cruel dismissal, every line that revealed the contempt she carried for me. It was all documented. And that night I shared it with the very people who had once believed her every word, her parents, her siblings, the people she thought would always stand behind her. I hit send and watched as proof, cold and undeniable, flew across their screens. Screenshots of her mocking me behind closed doors. Screenshots of her dismissing me like I was a burden. Screenshots of her contradictions, the sweet daughter or sister she pretended to be, and the cruel partner she really was. It didn't take long for the ripples to reach her. The flood began almost instantly. Calls from her parents, messages from her siblings, demands for explanations, questions she couldn't dodge, truths she couldn't twist. For the first time, she wasn't the one in control of the narrative. She wasn't the victim in their eyes anymore. She was the perpetrator. I imagined the shock on her face when her phone lit up, one notification after another, each one pulling her deeper into the corner she had built for herself. She probably expected me to grovel, to fight for her attention, to try and prove myself after her insults. But instead of finding me at her feet, she found herself surrounded by her own family's disappointment. And me? I sat back and watched her carefully curated world crumble under the weight of truth. There was no anger in me anymore, no urge to scream or demand. Just a quiet satisfaction in knowing I no longer had to defend myself. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. She had mocked me for being replaceable, for not being worthy. But in the silence of that night, when her own family turned to her with hard questions and disbelief, she realized who had truly been holding everything together all along. Not her. Me. The aftermath was unlike anything I had imagined. At first, she tried to storm through it with the same arrogance she had always carried. Her first messages to me were filled with anger, accusing me of betrayal, of going too far by exposing her words to her family. She insisted I had crossed a line, that what happened between us should have stayed private. But beneath the rage, I could already sense the fear. Her fortress of lies had finally collapsed, and for once, she couldn't control the story. Her calls came in waves, at first sharp and furious, voicemails full of venom saying I was weak, petty, ungrateful. Then, slowly, the edge dulled. The anger gave way to pleading. She texted that we could work it out, that she didn't mean everything she had said, that I had misunderstood her tone, her words. The very woman who once told me I was replaceable was now begging me not to leave her replaced. But the tide had already turned. The same family she had used as her shield, the people she convinced that I was boring or controlling, were now reaching out to me. Her parents messaged me, not with judgment, but with remorse. Her siblings called to apologize for believing her lies, for taking her side without ever questioning the truth. They told me they had read every screenshot, every cruel remark she made behind my back. Their disappointment in her was palpable. I sat there reading their words, feeling a quiet, surreal sense of justice. For years, she had painted me as the villain in their eyes. And now, in one moment, they saw me for who I truly was, and her for who she really was. The messages from her family weren't just apologies, they were validation. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that the pain I carried was real, that the sacrifices I made had been invisible only because she worked so hard to erase them. When she finally showed up at my door, her face was pale, her eyes wild. The confidence, the smirk, the dismissive air, gone. She wasn't the woman who declared me replaceable anymore. She was desperate. She said I had humiliated her, that I had destroyed her reputation. She begged me to delete the evidence, to call her family and tell them it wasn't what it looked like. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply looked at her with the same calm that started it all. Because in truth, I hadn't destroyed her. She had destroyed herself. All I did was hold up the mirror. The shock in her eyes when she realized I wasn't coming back, that her family wasn't rushing to her defense, that she was alone, completely alone, was the closure I never thought I'd have. I walked away from her, not with hatred, but with clarity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in shouting, in throwing back the same cruelty you were given. Sometimes the best revenge is replacing yourself so fully, so calmly, that the betrayer is left holding nothing but their own lies. And in that silence, I finally felt free.